Good morning, good evening, good afternoon everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today's video is a true crime story, and I have to be quite delicate how I deal with this because obviously this young girl who disappeared in 1984, some of her family still live. Sadly, her parents died not knowing what happened to her. This is the story of Carolyn Pruyser, I think it's pronounced. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, P-R-U-Y-S-E-R, Pruyser. And she disappeared from Peace River, Alberta, on the 17th of May in 1984. Now, the reason I'm covering this story is I don't know why Carolyn has suddenly come back into my mind. Basically, I lived in Peace River in 1986, so I was banished. My parents said I was too much of a handful, and the newspapers were always trying to run stories about me because my mother was a politician. And anyways, a long story, I always thought it was a wild overreaction that they had to send me to Canada. But that's what happened, and it was a marvellous opportunity. I wasn't happy about it at the time, but looking back on it, and I did enjoy myself in Peace River a lot. It's in Alberta, there's lots and lots of snow most of the year. Then they have a thaw, which is quite muddy, and then it's really quite nice, hot and sunny. And then the snow comes back again. I was sent there January, I think it was January 1986. The plan was that I would stay there for 6 months and then return when everything had died down. But I got a bit fed up actually, and I came back, I'm pretty sure, in the May. So I did 5 months there. And one of the first things that happened when I got there was I was introduced to all the young people who live in Peace River, and they were showing me around, and we went to the submarine burger place, which, oh, I love submarines. I've never since been able to find anywhere that makes them like that. They were huge. They were like this long, and I used to order 2 of them, ham and cheese in the microwave with chips and a grey coloured gravy. And my first visit to the submarine burger place, somebody came up to me and said, "Wow, you look just like Carolyn." And I said, "Who's Carolyn?" And everyone went, "Oh, Carolyn is a girl who disappeared. It's a mystery. She just disappeared not far from this submarine burger." And there was actually someone said, "Come see." There was a missing poster with a picture of her, but it was black and white and it was photocopied. And I was really looking, but it was a very poor quality picture. I couldn't really see what she looked like to see if she really did look like me. But quite a few people in the town would come up to me and say, "Wow, you look like Carolyn." Now, I've looked at her pictures on the internet now, so I don't think I've ever looked her up on the internet actually, but I've never forgotten her, and often wondered because there were various rumours of what had happened, or theories what happened. Basically, her car was found abandoned with, at the time I was told, all of the windows were open. I was also told there was snow on the ground. Well, I don't think so, because she disappeared on the 17th of May, and unless it had been a really cold spring, I'm pretty sure it would have been past the thaw by then, because I was there in the January, February, March, they were all definitely snow. I think April still had snow, but I was still there for the thaw, and it was really getting quite dry. You know, the grass was starting to turn brown and stuff. We even had a bear in the garden. So my cousins, I just don't know why I'm thinking about her at the moment, but I looked her up today. And because I'd been telling Graham a lot of stuff about it. And I just thought it was one of those stories no one would ever get to the bottom of, and that no one would ever remember. Well, quite the reverse. There are Reddit theory groups, there are people who grew up in Peace River, there are people who went to school with her, and there were people who helped with the search at the time. And they're all commenting to this very day, what happened to Carolyn? So I'll put a link in the description to an article about her. I will read a little bit of this out, and I'll also put a link to the Reddit group. Carolyn Pruyser was a 19-year-old University Alberta student when she disappeared on the 17th of May 1984. After watching a hockey game that evening, she drove to the 12-foot Davis Centre with a friend. They went into the submarine shop and left about 5 minutes after midnight and were spotted on security footage at a convenience store purchasing cigarettes. Around 10 minutes past midnight, Carolyn drove her friend home. This was the last time she was seen alive. Just 10 minutes later, Carolyn's car, a 1978 blue Ford Fairmont, was seen by a driver passing by, abandoned on Kaufman Hill Road. When Carolyn didn't arrive home, her father became worried and started searching for her. At 7 a.m, he found the car parked on the side of the road, facing northbound. The window on the driver's side was down, the car doors were unlocked, and her purse was still in the car. Carolyn is described as 5'3", 130 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. So that's the basic of the news. But I found this Reddit group this morning and I was reading it, and if the Pruyser family ever see this video, feel free to contact me. Probably not by email at avid@gardner.com, because I am still, every time I do 50 emails, another 100 come in, and I have fallen behind so badly. But I don't know, maybe in the comments, you've probably got a better chance in the comments, and I do hope that they find out what happened to her. The Reddit group, there's somebody on there who, well, there's quite a few theories. So before I'd seen the Reddit group, Graham was asking me about it last night and this morning, because I think it came to the front of my mind because yesterday Graham and I were talking about submarine burgers. We went for a supposed submarine hot dog type thing in our marina the other night, which was horrible. Or maybe it's because my cousins, who I went to go and live with, they lived in a fabulous log cabin that my cousin Don built himself. It was huge, it was like a mansion. So his wife, Valerie, is my mother's cousin, but they were always more like sisters. My mother died in 2014, but Valerie is still alive. Don sadly died I think it was this year, and Valerie is 89 now, or 91, and very sadly has Alzheimer's. But she's there's a lovely person, some people in Canada who send us pictures, and looks like she's just so happy. She always was a very happy, smiley person, and she's kind of like my second mum. So I went to live with them, and being there for about 5 months, I did have 1 or 2 boyfriends, nothing serious. And then I met this guy who I thought was just really cool and really intriguing, and he worked as a mechanic at the local petrol station. And I went out with him for a bit. He was very good looking. He looked like Tom Cruise, but he was quite clingy, and I just, had to end. And anyway, I was never going to stay in Canada. Immigration aside from anything, I was always going to go back to the UK. And they all used to ask me 3 questions when I was in Peace River. They'd say, have you ever met the Queen of England, Benny Hill, or John Cleese? Like England's really small and there's only half a dozen of us who live there. So yeah, I looked up this Reddit thing, and they talk about the local petrol station, and I remember this guy that I went out with. One of the first things he said to me was, wow, you look like Carolyn. And I don't know if Carolyn was an ex-girlfriend of his or how they knew each other. My cousin Don hit the roof when he found out I was going out with this guy. And he said, there were always rumours he was involved. Well, absolutely not. I'm convinced not. Because this guy was so sweet, such a gentle soul. He was just lovely. And he had said to me, I've had a bit of a hard... It was a very small town then. Population of about 6,000, so, use your imagination. And, You know, someone else came up to me and said, wow, you not only look like Carolyn, you're wearing a very similar blue coat. I had this royal blue coat. And I was always blonde then. I used to bleach my hair for about 10 years. I was blonde from when I was, 13 until I was about 22. And then I just dyed it back my natural colour. And a lot of people have asked, have I been bleaching my hair? I haven't. What I've been doing, because I'm going grey, is I just put a blonde dye on, and I've been doing that for about 3 months, and it sort of went through a red phase, and it's every time I do it, it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter, so I've obviously got a lot more grey than I started out with. I just figured that's good, you know, bit more dignified for me than keeping it dark. But yeah, Carolyn. Now, there were various theories. The reason she stuck out in my mind in the first place, apart from a lot of people saying, wow, you really look like her, and I've looked at her pictures now on the internet and I can't really see the resemblance. I don't know what made, it wasn't all the people. Some other people are going, no, she didn't look anything like Carolyn. So I was always felt a connection to her, you know, a link. And a lot of the kids thought she'd been abducted by aliens, because the story that I heard at the time was that there was snow on the ground when her car was found, but I don't think it could have been, unless, like I say, it was a very, very late thaw. But the story was all the car windows were down, the car was unlocked, her purse was on the seat, that there was fresh snow, that there were no footprints leaving the car, no other car tracks or something. But I've read on the Reddit thing, a lot of people say it was raining the night before. So I think it was the thaw. And of course, in a town, you know, I was at the school, wasn't really supposed to go to school, you know, it was against immigration, but the school turned a blind eye, much to my disgust. I thought, what? I got to go to school here? But anyway, I went to school, so I did have a bit of a social life. And I heard various rumours, and that abducted by aliens was a very popular theory. Carolyn was 19 when she disappeared, about 20 months before I turned up. So all my compatriots in Peace River would have been a lot younger. So at the time she disappeared, they would have been, 12 or 13. And of course, little kids that age, they will use their imagination. But I mean, obviously she wasn't abducted by aliens, something happened. Another rumour was that this guy that I subsequently went out with at the petrol station, that he was involved. My cousin, Don, was particularly like, I clashed with my cousin quite a lot, actually. Another theory was that it was police, that it was somebody in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And having read the Reddit thread this morning, I'm swaying that way, actually, and I'm going to put the link to the thread. Did you want to come and say anything, Graham? Because it's a subject that Graham and I have talked about together a lot, on and off the like my day at the beach at Delbeg, you know, that weird deja vu thing, or growing up in a haunted house, all these crazy things. I think there's always things that happen.
Cheers, everybody.
Second treat of the day, is it? Another treat.
Well, it's the last can of the 2 cans that I bought yesterday. They were 2 warm.
Okay. Yeah, I think we all have things that happen in our lives that are a bit weird that we often think about. Think, what was that all about? So, and I don't know why I started thinking of it. Maybe it's because Don died. Maybe it's because these people have been in touch about Cousin Val. Or maybe it's because you were diagnosed on the 17th of May and it's an anniversary of Carolyn's disappearance.
Well, first of all, let me just say that any opinion that I have is purely speculative, okay? Because I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
But from what I've read on the internet, her car was found at the side of the road with the window wound down, and her purse, we call it a handbag, I suppose, in the UK, was in the car.
Yeah.
And she was missing, and the car was just there. And that, to me, especially since it was midnight or thereabouts, that she went missing. I mean, why would you pull over at the side of the road in the dark and wind your window down? It's because you've been pulled by a police officer. Blue lights behind you. Okay, and it's not inconceivable that police officers abduct young women and murder them and do whatever they do with them. goodness knows. And I think that looking at the evidence that I've read, the very limited evidence that I've read on the internet, that would be my take on it. I think she was pulled by someone who either was a police officer or was pretending to be a police officer. Pulled her over, she wound the window down, and he's obviously opened the door, grabbed her, dragged her out. And her purse was still in the car. The keys were probably still in the car. I don't know that. But, I mean, these are things that I'd be looking at. And if the police at the time didn't investigate it, that's even more suspicious, isn't it? I mean, but maybe they made a half-hearted investigation.
I mean, they said
I don't know.
she just...
But what you said about the aliens...
Yeah.
Aliens, you know? I'm not saying aliens don't exist, but chances are that aliens had nothing to do with it, okay? So I think whoever did abduct and murder her, because I think that's what happened,
well,
the person responsible would have been probably pushing the alien theory the hardest. Anyway, that's just my take on it.
I'll just read a tiny bit out from this Reddit thing. I mean, my time in Peace River, I really enjoyed it. But I didn't live there all of the time. I was only there for 5 months. But
she was making friends with the Indians, and that was frowned on, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, they were fantastic. One person says, I grew up here and the place is effed up. Weird shit, crooked cops, lots of desolate places to cause trouble. This is still a notorious story of the town to this day. Used to rip around of Kaufman behind the high school. Yeah, the hill where her car was found, I think, was the hill going up towards the high school where I went. That's what people had said. And the submarine place was up there. I mean, I don't know. Like I say, this person has obviously lived in Peace River, you know, stuck there for a long time. And if you live in a small town, people can start feeling negatively. But I love
She never turned up, did she?
No.
So she was murdered. That's my theory.
I really don't know.
Again, that's my speculative opinion.
But is a person who goes into great detail about a particular police officer, and that was a big rumour. But there were lots of people in the town, like my cousin Don, who wouldn't hear a word said against the police. You know, they're all born from Jesus. They're sinless. They're perfect human beings, you know. That was how my cousin Don saw them. So the very suggestion that a Royal Mountie could have anything to do with this was... And a lot of people in the town were like that with him. And I can see that coming across.
Am I allowed to mention how Ukrainians got to
if you
live
like.
in the UK
my cousin,
and move to Canada?
Well, cousin Val was from Rugby. Is from... She's still alive. She's English. But yeah, Don was Ukrainian.
During the Second World War, right, I am giving you a history lesson, aren't I? But I'll make it brief. Right, there's two kinds of people in the Ukraine, Nazis, okay, and Russians. Okay, and they hated each other with a passion. And because the Russians sort of won, they sort of drove the Germans all the way back to Berlin, and that was that. There was a lot of Ukrainians that feared that they were going to be murdered, and they moved. They moved to England. So there's a whole load of Ukrainian refugees went to England because they were sort of, I'm not saying they were Nazis, but they were definitely on the side of the Nazis and Nazi sympathisers. And a lot of them that landed in the UK settled in the UK and stayed there, and others moved to other Commonwealth countries like Canada, for example. So they're more likely to have those kind of views, right-wing views, I would say.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say... I don't know.
I'm not accusing anyone of being a Nazi. I'm just saying that's what happened.
Yeah, study on.
In history, you can look that up. It's a fact. You know, it's not...
So this Reddit post, where this clearly is a person who... that they're really stuck on something, and as I say, there'll be a link in the description. Only the RCMP, which would be Royal Canadian Mounted Police, would have a fairly accurate file as to the whereabouts of this officer during his time with them and how that record corresponds to where he may have been at the times of the cases of missing and murdered persons in northern BC, Alberta and Edmonton. For an exact location as to where Carolyn's remains may have been disposed of, perhaps one should be asking the police officer who was on shift in Peace River from 4 p.m. on Thursday, May 17th, 1984, until that midnight. I understand the RCMP officer on that shift that evening in Peace River was actually posted out of Edson and perhaps on loan to the Peace River detachment. He may also have given leave to use the police cruiser to travel back to his family in Edson after the shift, and they keep going on and on and on about...
I can't see the Royal Canadian Mounted Police not investigating a suspicious officer.
No, I can't, but the problem is, back in those days, I was with another friend. There were 4 of us in the car. We bought a case of beer. He had a Trans Am. The beer was in the car. It was on the back seat between me and my friend, which was a big no-no. He'd said we should put the beer in the trunk. Anyway, Mountie police, whoop, whoop, here come the police. They pull us over and my friend got a huge fine.
Even though the beer wasn't opened?
Even though it wasn't open, it was on the back seat. You know, got the boys. We were allowed to stay in the car as girls on the back seat. Boys out the car, hands on the roof, spread legs, guns, the whole thing. He gave him a huge fine. And I was
beer in the car.
And I was going to say, well, what's the matter with you? And my friend said, don't, Fiona, just don't. Anyway, so he paid the fine and we drove off. And I said, why are you guys so scared of the police? I mean, I met a few officers in Sussex Police and they said, you don't understand, in this town they're really powerful. People go missing like Carolyn. I remember them saying that and I was like, well, I thought aliens took Carolyn. Anyway, I thought you guys could do some digging. It would be wonderful to find some answers for the Pruyser family, and according to that person in Reddit, they name a hell of a lot of other people, women of the same age, going missing in either the Peace River area or like Grand Prairie, Edmonton. Let me put it into context for people who are not familiar with Canada. For us to drive from Peace River to Edmonton would take 6 hours. They're quite straight, flat, wide roads, so you can do a good speed, but 6 hours.
So in Canadian terms...
In Canadian terms, it's pretty close.
Yeah, but in European terms, that's miles away.
Yeah. So, and apparently this person on Reddit has been tracking this officer who they say is still alive in his 70s and is high up in the Canadian government today.
Wow.
Apparently, yeah, he works at
the
Justice.
I personally think this is a cold case that needs reinvestigation.
Well, the person in the Reddit thing says they are claiming that they've tracked this person, this Royal Mountie person's career, and everywhere they've been posted, someone's gone missing. Now, they're police officers, people go missing all the time, but they reckon this is a serial killer, and up to 60 victims missing.
Well, it's been proven that, you know, Wayne Couzens, for example, in London, very recently, he's only just been lifed up forever, Metropolitan Police Officer. He was a firearms officer. He was on guard the night before he murdered this woman at the American Embassy, walking around with a machine gun. You know, so I mean, we don't know how many other people he's killed, but we know for a fact he was convicted of killing, murdering, raping, chopping her up into little bits, at least one woman.
Yeah.
So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that this has happened before.
I mean, I'm not saying it is a member of the Royal Mountie, but
I don't
also,
know. I honestly don't know.
As far as cold cases go, it's pretty difficult for them.
You've got to assess the crime scene. Sure, you got to look at the crime scene. Where was the car found? What condition was the car found?
There's no DNA. There's not going to be any evidence at all.
Of course not. If people investigating it were responsible for it, oh God.
The point the person on Reddit is making is, can't the police, as a cold case, look at who was on duty from 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 17th of May, 1984, until midnight, and then can they look at their career and where they were posted and check against the names listed in the Reddit article, and actually these people indicate they have written to the Canadian government at least last year, and that they have kind of denied all knowledge and gone, don't want to talk about this.
It's called investigating a crime. especially a serious crime like a murder.
I mean, I could be completely wrong. The person on Reddit could be completely wrong. I was just
No,
shocked at how much is out there on the internet about Carolyn. From a little town, Peace River, 1984. That's a long time ago.
It's obvious to me she was murdered. And I think you may or may not agree with me, but she never showed up again.
Perhaps
This is a cold case that needs to be investigated thoroughly by people who have the ability to do that.
And some of you might well have the resources or ability to do that, especially those of you in Canada, and look into it. So I just thought I'd make this video today for what it's worth. If the Pruyser family see this, hope it hasn't caused any upset. I do know there are people out there still trying to find out what happened. There was another guy who I think was accused and very sadly committed suicide. I don't know what the backstory is there. It's all in this Reddit link. It makes for fascinating reading. And what I can confirm is a lot of what the posters say about the town. I recognise, of course, the submarine shop where the school was in relation. Peace River has since flooded and a new town, well I say new town, I think it was about 15 years ago, has been built higher up. So if any of you have got any clues, or if you just want a mystery to look into, I know they call us armchair detectives, which I think is very rude.
Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with
There
that.
have been many an armchair detective solved a mystery. So thank you very much for listening, and good luck, and look forward to hearing your thoughts and theories in the comments below.